the dog that carried colours. In the land of Throstle, colour had become a memory, not by nature, but by decree. Generations ago, after a great war divided the continent, the leaders of Throstle had stripped the world of colour, not literally, but culturally. Vibrancy was outlawed. Clothing came in shades of grey, homes painted in ash and stone, and even language was limited. No poetry, no music beyond neutral tones. The belief was simple. Colour stirred emotion, and emotion led to conflict. So they chose peace, and they paid for it with their joy. In the village of Bry, 17-year-old Oren walked with his head down, like most others. He was born tone clear, the rarest and least valued among Throssell's societal tones. No tint to his hair, pale eyes, his clothes always looked bleached, his voice soft, his presence unnoticed. Most believed tone-clear people were hollows, empty, quiet, easily overlooked, the perfect citizens in a colourless world. But inside, Oren was bursting. He was bursting with thoughts he couldn't say out loud, with questions that no one wanted to answer, with dreams of running through forests of red trees and golden leaves, of swimming in oceans the colour of sapphires, of hearing music that made the bones hum. He kept these dreams buried like contraband thoughts, tucked away in the corners of his mind where no one could see. He hated being called a hollow. It made him feel like a cup that no one wanted to fill. But Oren wasn't empty. He was too full, full of colour he couldn't see, full of emotions he couldn't name, full of yearnings for something he'd never known, but somehow missed with aching clarity. He would sometimes sit in the attic at night and press his hands to his chest, wondering how something could burn so bright inside and still be invisible to the world. It was lonely, but he endured it, because deep down he believed the world was wrong about people like him, and he waited, not for permission, but for a moment, the right moment. It happened on a fog-heavy morning. While delivering packages for his guardian, a bitter grey tailor, Oren saw something strange near the old orchard, a dog, but not like any he'd seen before. Its fur shimmered in shades, amber and chestnut and soft midnight. Its eyes weren't dulled, they shone. It looked wild, unkempt, alive, and behind it, the trail. The grass where it stepped was green, not grey, not olive grey, not fog grey, green. Oren fell to his knees. The dog didn't run. It watched Oren, then padded forward, leaving streaks of colour, purple petals, yellow dandelions, brown bark that glistened with amber. The fog seemed to peel away as it passed. Oren followed it, heart racing. They reached a clearing. The dog sat, and Oren wept. He didn't know why, only that he hadn't felt anything so real in his whole life. It wasn't just the colour, it was the way the colour felt. The green underfoot was not simply seen, it vibrated in his chest, awakened something deep in his ribs. The air smelled richer, like a memory of spring that had been locked away for centuries. Even the silence was different, full, not empty. For the first time, Oren felt seen by the world around him, like the trees themselves had turned their heads. It was as if the grey veil over his life had been lifted, and beneath it, everything was warm and breathing and sacred. He had long suspected that the world was hiding something beautiful. Now he knew it was true. Oren brought the dog home. He named him Clove, after the reddish dust that sometimes clung to the orchard floor. To the world, Clove looked like a dusty stray, but to Oren, he shimmered. The colour came when they were alone, quiet bursts of blue in the bathwater, flickers of gold on the curtains where Clove lay in sun. Oren began to draw in secret, with stolen charcoal and old wax berries. He sketched Clove, then dreams, then things he didn't know he'd ever seen, colourful memories from infancy, perhaps buried deep. One day, the neighbour girl, Brina, followed Oren into the orchard. Brina had lived in the same row of houses her entire life. She had passed Oren hundreds of times on the street, seen him at market, in the square, at the quiet gatherings where no one spoke more than they had to. And yet, despite their proximity, she had never truly seen him. He had always been part of the background, a blur of pale clothes and soft footsteps, a hollow. But that morning, something was different. Perhaps it was the way the light caught in his hair, revealing faint undertones of gold. Or maybe it was his eyes, no longer dulled but flickering with purpose, like a flame just catching. He didn't walk like a hollow anymore. He moved like someone following something important. So she followed him. She saw the trail and collapsed. Oren panicked until she looked up, tears streaking her face. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember my mother's red scarf." She begged him not to tell. But soon she visited Clove daily, and the colour grew. The change began quietly. A bakery window glinted with an almost imperceptible amber hue. A child laughed too freely in the marketplace, clutching a toy painted with chalky red lines. Flowers began sprouting through cracks in the stone gutters, not grey, but violet, coral, canary yellow. Some villagers whispered that dreams were returning and more vivid than before. Others were not pleased. Rumours travelled quickly in Bray, especially when emotion threatened the order of things. Fear crept in among the older generation, those who remembered the stories of the war and what emotion had done to the world. Soon there were tales of colour blooming in distant towns, a blue feather found in a schoolhouse, a shopkeeper who sobbed in joy when her child showed her a green leaf, a painter in a coastal village who claimed she could see through walls when she held her brush. The phenomenon spread until it could no longer be ignored. The night before the officials arrived, the house was unbearably quiet. Even the wind held its breath. Oren lay curled on his attic floor, Clove nestled beside him, the only source of warmth in the long grey hush. The lantern had gone out hours earlier, but Oren's eyes refused to close. A tension curled inside him, like something in the air had shifted, heavy, waiting. At last, sleep came, and with it, colour. He was standing in the orchard, but it was blooming beyond reality. Blossoms burst from the soil with a pulse like heartbeats. Vines climbed the trees with golden veins, and the sky poured with ribbons of iridescent light. It wasn't just beautiful, it was alive. Clove stood in the centre of it all, but not the same Clove. This version radiated, his fur shimmered with impossible hues. Blues Oren didn't know the names for, reds that tasted like memory. His eyes were galaxies. Oren tried to speak, but found his mouth full of pigment, not choking, not painful, just full. He raised his hands. The skin on his fingertips peeled away like old paper, revealing glowing trails underneath, stained with colour he hadn't yet painted. And then a sound, a low tone that vibrated through the dream, not threatening but warning. Clove stepped toward him. In that moment, Oren didn't hear words. He felt them, a message carried in warmth and light. "They are coming." Oren gasped, awake. The attic was cold again, but his hands still glowed faintly in the dark. When he lit the lamp, he saw them, red, blue, violet, streaks of colour across his knuckles, the colours Clove had carried in the dream. He looked at the dog, now peacefully sleeping, chest rising and falling as if nothing had changed. But everything had, and the knock on the door would come soon. That's when the Agency for Emotional Preservation and Neutrality arrived. Clad in sharp slate grey uniforms that caught no light, they moved through the town with crisp precision. Their boots struck cobblestones in perfect synchronicity. Their caps were narrow, brims casting permanent shadow over their eyes. Their badges bore an emblem, a flame encircled by a lock. They were the keepers of calm, the suppressors of stirrings. Their mandate, to protect society from the chaos of feeling. They brought scanners, analysts, and a sense of dread. They set up camp in the old meeting hall and began their work, interviewing families, scanning households, collecting data on emotional anomalies. Within a week, they had narrowed their investigation to a cluster of blocks where the pulse of colour seemed strongest. And then they identified the house. Oren's attic to them was a beacon. From their equipment, something invisible to the eye surged upward from that very room, a frequency too rich, too alive. The decision to investigate was made without hesitation. The chief investigator, Mela Thane, led the raid. Tall, angular, with a voice like cold steel, Thane was a man shaped by pain. Years ago, in a moment of unchecked grief after the death of his daughter, he had destroyed the family he swore to protect. He blamed emotion, he blamed colour. He had risen through the ranks by silencing what he once allowed to speak in himself. He was merciless but not cruel, only utterly convinced. Thane stood at Oren's front door, his hand on the latch, flanked by 4 agents. They did not know about clove, not yet, but the scent of colour was thick in the air, and the attic was glowing. They intended to find the source, and they intended to extinguish it. The rumours had run rampant. Odd brightness near the orchard. Kids disappearing after curfew. Some claiming dreams in colour. Until that night, when the officials arrived at Oren's home. Clove growled. Oren hid his drawings. They didn't find the dog, or the drawings, but they took his guardian in for questioning. Treason by vibrancy, they called it. The cell was small and spare, lit only by a single pulsing bulb that cast a weak amber cone over a narrow metal bench. The walls were stained concrete, damp at the seams, as if the room itself perspired with dread. There was no window, and the air was stale with the scent of steel and the distant reek of antiseptic. It was quiet enough to hear the drip of something unseen, and the slow, patient hum of the surveillance lens mounted high in the corner. Oren's guardian, Master Callan, the town's tailor, sat hunched beneath the light, his jacket folded neatly beside him, his shoulders broad but slumped. His calloused hands rested on his knees, motionless now, though they often itched to work a needle through cloth. He had not spoken since they'd brought him in. No one had come to question him. Not yet. And so he sat and thought, damn the boy. He thought it first in anger. Quick and hot like a struck match. Damn him for poking at things better left buried. Damn his bright eyes and soft defiance. Damn his mother for leaving me with him. The last thought tasted like ash. He closed his eyes and leaned back against the wall. Her face came to him, as it always did when he let his guard down. Lyra. Lyra with her copper laugh, and that stubborn streak that had once made him fall in love and later made him fear for her life. She'd painted once, beautiful ruinous things, forests lit by a second sun, eyes filled with longing, a child cradled in arms that glowed with impossible light. She'd hidden her work well, but not well enough, and she paid for it. He exhaled slowly. In the dimness, the sound felt too loud. He had been there when Oren was born, white-knuckled and blood-spattered. He had held the child, red and squalling, as Lyra slipped from the world with a whisper. He had raised him because there was no one else, not out of love, not at first, maybe not ever completely. But he had stayed, and the boy had grown, quiet, observant, curious in dangerous ways. The agents knew how to find the cracks. That was their craft. They'd start with long silences, let the mind turn inward like a screw. Then they'd ask about loyalty, about disappointment. They'd ask, what has he done to deserve your protection? They'd ask, what could he have done to deserve your love? They turned father against daughter, sister against brother, wife against wife. It was always subtle at first, until it wasn't. Callan rubbed the bridge of his nose with a trembling hand. They want me to hate him, he thought. That's how they win. If I let them plant the seed of resentment and water it with fear, they won't even need chains. He opened his eyes, blinking at the light. The bulb flickered. He hated that it flickered. He's just a boy, he whispered, the words barely breath. He could see Oren's face now, as it had looked the night before, pale but calm, alert, not surprised by the arrival of the agents, perhaps not even frightened. Callan had almost been angry at that, but underneath he had felt something worse, shame, because the boy's calm had not come from trust, it had come from expectation. He knew this day would come, Callan thought, and he still drew the damn dog in colour, and still a part of him, quiet but resolute, wanted only to see the boy safe, to protect him as he'd promised, for Lyra, for the memory of what they'd nearly been, even now, especially now. A sound, metal against metal, the lock turning. Callan stood slowly and slipped his jacket back over his shoulders. Let them ask their questions, he thought. I will lie if I must. I will protect him, even if I hate him for it. The door opened and two agents stepped into the light. This is the end of part 1. If you are enjoying this story, please consider a like or a subscribe or both. Please share your thoughts in the comment section. If part 2 is not yet available, it will be here shortly. Thank you for listening.